Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, me and my good friend Lee here, aka Promblembeing, are going to be talking about the latest Marvel film that I've had the unfortunate to sit through, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But in all fairness though, this film had a lot of good, but some stuff that was not so good, which we're going to get onto in this video. So we'll try and keep this as brief as we can, but I've got a lot that I feel I need to say about this film. Now, I did watch this for the first time with Lee last week, I believe. It was about a week and a half ago. Really actually surprised me because the good bits were very good, and typical with me, I then became really obsessed with Rocket Raccoon. So I've now got several figures on the way. You'll probably get reviews of those on my toy channel anytime soon. And yeah, it made me want to go back and watch the first two films, which I did. Now, the first Guardians film I haven't seen since 2014, so when it first came out, didn't think much of it, and I'll let you guys know what I thought of the first two a bit later on. Watched the second one, and now I've just gotten around to watching the third one for a second time. And yeah, I've got a lot that I need to say about it. I think it is it, and I just know you people are getting ready in the comments, those of you who absolutely love this film. So I'm just going to say, is it bad? Absolutely not. Is it the best Marvel film ever, or the best Marvel film since Endgame or Infinity War or No Way Home? Well, I don't know. That's really for you guys to decide. But in this video, we're just going to give our honest opinions on what we thought of this film. So yeah. So what can you remember about this film, Lee?
It's very saturated, isn't it? Like all the colors are turned up to 11. It's one of those superhero movies that isn't a superhero movie. It's got that very sort of science fiction palette to it, and it kind of doesn't kind of sit well with the sort of other superhero Marvel universe kind of thing. It seems to be quite a separate entity in its own right. Which I kind of do prefer in terms of the Guardian series being generally better than pretty much most of phase 2.5, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
whatever. I think it's been a good run. I think it probably could have been better in many degrees, but I think it has a lot of charm and characters that you actually can develop along with and appreciate, and it has its own charm. And I think that makes it kind of unique out of all the Marvel MCU movies. But again, it doesn't feel like an MCU movie series to me. As I say, it seems very much on its own, which I like. I do like that.
Yeah.
And James Gunn has a particular oomph, as they would say, which does set it out apart. And the characters are so completely bonkers. And the third film takes a very tonal change from particularly the first film. I think the second film had a quite intense intensity to it, which sort of delved into sort of father figures, didn't it? Really, and then in the third film, you've got this kind of very you've got a lot of pathos in this, but you've also got a lot of very intense darkness to it, and I think some of it works and some of it kind of gets a bit glossed over and pushed aside for some reason. It's a weird one. It is a weird one, and I dreaded watching this because I'd heard all the rumors about it, all the leaks and things, and it made me not want to watch it. But we'll get onto that.
Right. Yeah, I think we all know which scenes we're referring
Mhm.
to. For me, this film left a lot to be desired. I think, like you say, there is quite some serious tonal shifts in this film.
Mm.
Sometimes I think and I know someone else on YouTube did say this, it's almost as if the film doesn't quite know what it wants to be. It's got the typical silly, really over the top to the point of annoying Marvel humor,
Mm,
which is borderline cringe at times, and it's always there to just completely remove all tension out of a scene. And I understand that the Guardians films have very much been built on that kind of humor. I mean, going back from the first one, I would say that's where it's always been kind of slapstick and silly. But the trouble is with this film trying to take such a more darker and more mature step, to suddenly have all of that, little light-hearted humor mixed in there, it just kind of throws it off,
mm,
and it does take me out of some scenes. Now, granted, I think for the most part, especially when it comes to the darker stuff, the performances by the actors, I just want to say right now that the actors do a brilliant job in this film. I think they're all on top point. I think
mm.
they're doing the best they can with what they've got, especially Chris Pratt. We all know he's an amazing actor. His name escapes me right now. I'll have to look it up. But the guy who plays the High Evolutionary, who is a fantastic villain,
Yeah.
there's no denying that, does an amazing performance. And yeah, I obviously Rocket Raccoon, absolutely amazing for the time that you get to see him. Obviously, so I don't know. I think we're going to have to say spoilers ahead because obviously we are going to be talking about the plot for what little of it there actually is. But yeah, so just to give you guys a summary of this story. So at the start of the film, the Guardians are on. I think it's called Nowhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that giant godhead. You'll have to forgive me, guys, because I've never read Marvel comics, so I just kind of have to go by what I'm seeing on screen. I don't understand the big lore or everything, but that nowhere place inside the big dead godhead in space. That's a
Which is
mouthful, right?
a fantastic piece of design.
It is. Visually, it
I,
looks.
I,
I
I
just.
think, yeah, I think this film is, well, I think this series has a very unique, um, what would have been classed just only about 10 or 15, 20 years ago as unfilmable, design language. And I think that they really do push the boat out in many ways with the world building,
They do.
which I appreciate. But sometimes I feel that it kind of can come at a bit of a cost because your eyes are being bruised by all this very highly saturated color and
Mm,
speed and brightness and sounds, music, and all this, and it can be a bit kind of distracting in many ways because you're looking at all these things, trying to take it all in, and you're kind of missing what's
that
going on.
that was the problem I had with the first film.
Mm.
Even when I was a kid, so it's not me getting old. It is just I had exactly the same problem when I was 14. I was watching it, and I just couldn't. It was actually hurting my eyes. Because there's just so many things happening all at once. But I was going to mention, you said world building. Do you get kind of Star Trek vibes from this?
I definitely get a very I know what you mean. Yeah, there's definitely it's set pieces, isn't it? You got different sort of set pieces, especially when they're on that. I mean, before we go into too many details, but when they're on that planet with the sort of hybrids,
Mm.
that's a very Star Trek concept,
It
very much
is.
so.
I felt it was almost something that would be in the Orville.
Yeah, and it definitely had that feeling about it. And I think anyone who's been watching Strange New Worlds will look at that and think, well, it's funny because now they're copying the parody Orville by sort of trying to copy that kind of humor and that style of storytelling. I haven't watched it, but I've heard that from friends. I've only seen the first series of that,
Mm.
which was I enjoyed it, but yeah, I kind of think that writers in Hollywood now are very uh, possessed by the notion that they've got to keep putting these sort of American Californian style humor into everything, and
Yeah.
and what they tend to do is And I was watching Paul Chato, Paul Chato, I should say, on his channel. He was doing a sort of deconstruction of Strange New Worlds, and I think this applies to Hollywood in general, was that they use humor to tell you the subtext. So they will, rather than let the subtext do the talking, and they deliver lines which imply, or the audience can infer from that, something of a deeper meaning. They just lay it out. It's a kind of humor which tells you what they're doing.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing the audience to pick up on the subtext. And I see that a lot in a lot of Hollywood movies, and he's right. And I kind of see it a lot in this as well. Not so much in this, but I think that is a thing that happens with particular humor that they employ for these things. They tend to tell you what's happening through the humor. It's like, this is the bit where you're going to laugh now, or this is the bit where they're in danger because they're going to say something funny about it.
That's what it feels like,
right? And it kind of does. It's a kind of manipulation of the audience to make you know where you are in the story, rather than telling you a coherent story which you can follow along. And I'm not saying it's not an incoherent story by any stretch, but it was very convoluted. And it's one of those things with Marvel films in general, because they all interlink with each other. You have to watch not only the series of films, but also the ones around it and the TV shows and all these other things.
I was going to actually get onto that just a bit later on, when talking about, what I had to do leading up to this film, to make sure I'd watched everything, so I'd followed their journey. And it turns out they even were in Love and Thunder, but I am not watching that. I'd rather go and jump in a lake, quite frankly. So I think I'm just going to be checking out the clips on YouTube. But that's another thing.
This film links back as well to Endgame.
Yeah.
And because one of the characters in this comes back, but it's not the same character. And you wouldn't know that unless you watched Endgame. And
exactly.
And if you look at the whole trilogy of the Guardians films, as I said, it's so kind of removed in its own bubble from the MCU in a way. Well, it was.
It used
until
to be,
Endgame,
yes.
And then Love and Thunder and all that. And that kind of spoils the continuity. If you just want to take those three films
exactly
on their own merit, in their own universe, in their own bubble, you can't, because you've got that missing story, and people are going to be watching the three films going, what happened?
Well, that's what I mean, because if you went straight from Guardians 2 to Guardians 3, Groot's fully grown, the Quill is upset for some reason that Gamora's left. Where's Gamora gone? And there's all of these differences, and you're just going to be sat there thinking to yourself, like, wait, what's happened? So it really is, it's a shame, really, because this, and I said the same thing about the original Iron Man. Yes, it was the start of the MC universe, but it was done subtly. It was Iron Man was its own entity. It just put in some little nods at the end to what the next film was going to be. And then at the end of phase 1, they brought everything together, and I like that. But from phase 2 onwards, it started to feel like an anthology series. So you had to watch every single film. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a clue what would happen when you got to the end. And you said it, lots of people have said this. It's more like a product than it is a piece of art. It's like, watch this, get hyped for next product, go watch that product, get hyped for next product.
And
it's like
damages
a conveyor belt.
What they've done is because they've corporatized it and commercialized it to such a degree as product, they've undermined the artistry of the story, because when it's displaced in a sort of transmedia, on a different film or a different whatever TV show, you're crossing different formats, and it as a coherent linear story, you've got holes in that story which you can only plug if you get every other bloody film in the franchise and piece it all together. So you can't isolate it, take it. I mean, if I were them, and I was to release this as a 3-movie box set, I would have to include some kind of
Recap.
recap, or put in an added extra scene at the start of each movie, or a pre-scene before each movie, or whatever, in order to kind of, like a bit of Lord of the Rings, have someone doing a monologue
Previously
describing the
on
events,
Guardians of the Galaxy.
But even then, you're introducing characters like Thor, or you know,
Yes.
all these other
And this is
characters.
a problem. I just want to interrupt you. This is a
Yeah.
problem that I think people are annoyed that James Gunn is doing this with his new DC universe. Is already we haven't even got the first film yet, which is a Superman film, and we're already discovering that there's going to be other characters in there. And it's like, why can't we just have films that stand on their own 2 feet anymore? Why can't we just have Spider Man? Why can't we just have Iron Man? Why can't we just have Guardians of the Galaxy? Why? And then, if you wanted to, bring them all together for a big special event, but don't have it like, that the films rely on each other, because it means that if you get a bad film, which, there are plenty of them in the MCU, oh, I've now got to sit through that, otherwise I'm not going to know what's going on in this good film.
Yeah, I mean, you had Superman in '78, which had Superman in it and Lex Luthor. Very simple. Batman, you had Batman, and you had the Joker. Very simple. Even up to Iron Man, you had Iron Man. Okay, very simple. And they were successful because it knew what it was. It didn't need to rely on sort of fan pleasing too much with too many things all at once too soon. Now, I think with something like Superman doesn't need Hal Jordan, or I don't even think it's that Green Lantern, but it's a Green Lantern.
Yeah.
So I don't think, you want to introduce Green Lantern in his own film more successfully than the first one, but you kind of want to really set your stall out and show what this new Superman is. Okay, it's a new Superman. It's a younger Superman who looks like a younger Henry Cavill, weirdly enough. So I'm thinking somewhere down the line they're going to do, um, uh, Henry Cavill, bring him back as the older Superman in Kingdom Come or something like that. I can imagine that happening.
Yeah.
Because he does look a bit like him, a little bit. But yeah, without getting too much into the DC thing, I think it's very important that you have enough faith in the characters to have their own pull. Now, Guardians of the Galaxy didn't need much in the way of what was going on in the MCU really, that much, other
No.
than what's his face.
But unfortunately, that's how it started, because
Yeah.
Guardians really was what kicked off the Thanos story arc.
Thanos. Yeah, sorry, I had a brain fart.
And that is one of the reasons why I wasn't so keen on the first one, because I didn't like the villain. The villain was a servant of Thanos, who once he had found the Infinity Stone, I think they find the first Infinity Stone, he decides to keep it for himself, bloody bloody blah, and turn against him and be all evil. He's boring. He's boring. He's a dull, bland, boring villain that I don't care about, that I don't have any reason to care about. He has no connection to the Guardians whatsoever. I think they just happened to come across him, from what I can remember. And
But it's
I
not only
know
that.
Gamora. Hold on, sorry. I
Sure.
know Gamora is Thanos' daughter, and she's gone to try and, make sure that he doesn't take possession of the stone. But back then, I don't think many people had a clue what was going on, because, like I say, I had never read the comics. So the comic fans were like, oh, this is that, and this is this, and this is that. And they were geeking out, nerding out. I didn't have a clue what was going on. I don't know the lore. I didn't know the lore at the time, and I
Well,
just
that's the
think,
thing. You're trying to please all the people all the time, and you can't, because you're going to have the hardcore comic book fans who are probably going to go, well, that's not the comic book anyway, and then you're going to have the normies, or the casual viewer, or just the MCU fans coming in and going, this is great. Well, who are they? You know, like,
Yeah.
um, and the other main problem, really, which is the point I wanted to make, there was
Sorry.
no, not at all. It's the point is that to watch these three movies, which are 2.5 hours or whatever each, as well, but you've got to then got to go and watch another film which is 2.5 to 3 hours long,
Which
and
is what I
another
had to
one
do.
which is
Yeah.
another 2.5 or 3 hours long. I mean, that's a lot of
And
time
in that
just to
whole
know what's
time,
going on.
I think the Guardians had, what, 10 minutes, if that?
Yeah, and that has a profound knock-on effect for the rest of the Guardian series, which means you've got to sit through something else. I mean, let's say you totally love the Guardians, but you're not a fan of Thor. You've got to sit through that to know
Yeah.
what's happened.
And,
You know,
I think it's this thing that, oh, well, if you're a fan of Iron Man, then you must be a fan of Doctor Strange. Oh, if you're a fan of Spider-Man, then you must be a fan of Black Widow. It's like, no, that's not how it
yeah, but
works.
then that argument would be like, then you must be a fan of Captain Marvel. No, yeah, you're going to watch Captain Marvel just to know, to watch an end scene or something. You know, to sit through that, to get to an end scene to explain what the next thing is, the next product,
Yeah, but as I say,
etc.
we won't be going into all that.
Mm.
But this is one of the reasons why I personally think, and a lot of people seem to disagree, but I think Guardians 2 is a masterpiece. And
Mm.
I not only think it's the best film of the trilogy, but I think if all of the films had had that level of quality, this would have been the best trilogy hands down. And
That's
I
interesting
think,
because a lot of people cite the first one. I love the first one.
mm,
Um,
I didn't
I,
hate it.
I know you didn't hate it, but I mean, for me, it was a good, jolly, fun romp, and
Yeah.
it was very light-hearted. It was very easy on the eye, as much as oversaturation can be, but it was fun, light-hearted, and some great comic moments, and actual with the humor worked, and the music was great. The
Oh, yeah.
second one I really did enjoy as well, and I know it gets a lot of stick, and you know you do defend it voraciously and quite rightly so. I think there was a lot of issues with the ego planet thing. And I think that was one of the things. It was kind of an attack on fathers or something.
Okay. I just, well, if you wanted to bring that into it, I can kind of see. I can
Mm.
see, but at this rate, at this point, men are just evil, aren't they? In like every bloody Hollywood film.
Very true.
So,
But the
but if
third one, the third one, kind of bookended a lot of that. It was a lot more. I mean, and one of the main criticisms of it was that it was very dour, very
yeah,
depressing, and you know,
well, it was.
yeah. I mean,
But
there were a lot of. I mean, I
but
was dreading it because
yeah,
you
but
know,
I still found that despite that, there was some beauty in there. And
yeah.
people making out like it's this depressing film that doesn't have anything to make you smile, that's just not true.
Mm,
And, sometimes the best stories, the most impactful stories are the ones that really get you to your stomach, that
mm.
really. And then I feel like the resolution at the film, the end bit, although it had that cringe pop in it, which I'll get onto later, was a moment that did make me smile and it felt deserved. But what I was just going to say about the second one is that the reason why I love the story so much is because it felt like characters were finally being developed.
Mm.
In a sense, it felt Quill, we learned that his dad had left and that obviously his mom died, and obviously discovering that your father is this big, powerful being, must have been insane. And you can see that Quill goes on a journey in that film,
Mm.
thinking his father is wonderful and amazing, and then discovering, oh, actually. And then there's Rocket, and I always forget his name, but who Michael Rooker plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his scenes with Rocket are once again just some of the best. Like, I know who you are, boy, because you're me, and just brought tears to my eyes, honestly. And
Yeah.
I much prefer the Gamora from the first two films, obviously. That's another thing I'm gonna have to get onto. I love Baby Groot. Everyone loves Baby Groot. I kind of wish he didn't grow up again, to be
uh,
honest. And I also
Yondu, that was it.
Yondu, that's it. Yeah, perfect. I thought
Right.
his character was wonderful in
Yeah, he was
Guardians
great.
2. and it just
Because his
masterfully
character
played.
was so layered. Because you thought he was just an asshole, but really he did give a shit. You know,
He did,
he
and
did. He was a father in the
that's
end.
another thing I loved. It was the resolution between Quill and Yondu when you realise that actually Yondu didn't just take him; he took him to keep him safe from his father.
Exactly.
Because his father was, well, obviously big spoiler here, but his father was basically going and getting giggity giggity with a lot of women from multiple planets so that he could put his powers into the child that would come from that relationship, because he wanted to create someone to be like him. But thousands of beings were destroyed by the process, but Quill wasn't. So he had finally found his son in many ways. But when Quill found out that what the father did, I'm just going to call him the father because I can't remember his name. Um, when he found out what he did, he's like, "You've killed my mom," and it's like, and then it just turns out that Yondu knew all along what his father planned to do to him, and that's why he ran. He took him to keep him safe. And that's when you realize, no, he isn't an arsehole. His character was wonderful. There were so many layers to him.
And he went out like a boss.
He did. And even James Gunn admitted he wished it had been Gamora instead of him. But obviously, I'm guessing there were plans from Disney. And yeah.
Yeah, well, studio interference.
Studio interference. And that, I think, is the biggest downfall of this trilogy. It's studio interference. The characters, they had a wonderful story, and sadly it got sidelined and interrupted. I think James Gunn did the best he could to resolve everything, and I think he did mostly a good job, but I'll get onto that a bit later. But then, just to kind of get this out, I am not fond of Drax. Never have been. I think in the first film, his character was interesting, especially when he talks about the death of his family and how Thanos killed them. But then his character just got worse and worse with each film.
Fair
In the
enough.
third one, he is borderline insufferable. I can't stand him in the third one. He is just purely there to make jokes that aren't even funny.
He had a nice moment with the kids, like
Yeah,
I like that. He like because he was called an idiot and stupid, and
yeah. I
then
don't
his
appreciate this defense.
stupidity became just sort of this kind of childlike thing that was relatable to the kids rescued from the ship. But
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of nice.
I did love that you weren't born to be a destroyer. You were born to be a dad.
Yeah,
I
I
did
thought
love that very much. I was
that
like,
was a very nice message.
hold on, are you actually complimenting fathers? Disney, are you feeling okay? No, but props to James Gunn for that. I really do appreciate that, because it's like fathers are shat on all the time. And it was so nice to, you got Drax, he's this big, strong, what people would consider maybe toxic, you know what, but he's such a playful child on the inside. And of course there's Mantis, who I I do actually quite like. Sometimes she can be a bit annoying, especially in the Christmas special. God, we haven't even gotten onto that yet.
I
Which
liked her.
I mean, look, she's funny. She's funny, don't get me wrong, but sometimes she just reminds me of something from Real Housewives of California or something. Like, I just can't. Um, Nebula, love her. She's
Karen
played to
Gillan, amazing.
perfection by Karen Gillan. Absolutely fantastic. I'm so happy that they made her a full-time member. And that's the trouble, you see. Once again, her story arc revolves heavily around Infinity War and Endgame. So that's not going to make any sense unless you watch that.
Yeah. Same
You
with
know,
Gamora,
yeah.
you're having to rely on Thor: Love and Thunder, which I never watched. So I was trying to work out what the hell was going on in the third film, because there's like Gamora's what?
She's back
Why?
now.
This is not the same. What? So
I
again,
know.
it kind of locks you in. It's like imagine if Disney was sold to Apple, right? And like anything Apple, it locks you in.
Pretty
So
much.
it's kind of very similar kind of ethos. You have to keep locked into this universe, and you can't.
Yeah, so those of you who think
Yeah.
this stuff's going to get better, probably not.
Yeah.
Which is why, for me, you know what is nice is now that these trilogies are starting to get wrapped up. Obviously, Spider-Man trilogy's finished now with No Way Home. I actually said that would be my last MCU film, and what a
Mm.
way to go out, you know, because
Mm.
that was fantastic. Now this trilogy's wrapped up, I really am seeing just not really much point in getting invested in Marvel films anymore.
I think it's over. I really do. I've seen nothing coming out of Disney or Marvel that inspires much in the way of hope. I think the genre is tired. I think the way that they produce them and just churn these things out as product rather than as creative works is very depressing, because I just think that they've lost sight of what superheroes are meant to be, and they've kind of deconstructed them to the nth degree that they don't really make much sense as
No.
heroes. You know,
Yeah.
they're moralizing about current day politics, and it's just so tedious. And people want escape. You can have morality and stuff in there, but you don't want to skew it politically. You want to keep it something universal for everybody, regardless of what your personal beliefs are or whatever. And I
Mm.
just think that with Disney running these franchises pretty much into the ground, I don't have much hope. And you know what's coming up? We've had, what is it, the Secret Invasion, which is just a TV show, which apparently by all metrics is extremely boring,
Well, I'm
nonsensical.
actually going to get on to this a bit later in the topic. Where do we go from here?
Ms.
Where can
Marvel, the
we go
Marvels,
from here?
no one's interested in that. And you've got, well, I mean, what is there? I mean, there's just nothing. It's a bunch of Disney TV shows that run for 6 episodes that no one really watches. And I don't hold out much hope for Fantastic Four, which is, they've tried it twice already
Oh no, they just
and
can't
both
seem to get
failed.
that one right.
Yeah, I mean, what works in a comic book doesn't necessarily translate to screen. And Fantastic Four, it's just one of those unique things. You know, I used to love the Fantastic Four
Do you know,
cartoons and the comic books, and I
Lee, I'm
just don't see
so
them.
glad you've said that because I was actually going to touch on that.
Hmm.
One of another problems that I think these films have, and some people may disagree, and that's fine. I don't always think that comic books and even storybook characters translate very well to film
Mm.
because I think they are meant to be consumed differently.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've noticed. I've gone and I've read comics with I've gone into a comic book with the expectation that it's going to have the complexity and the well thought outness of a film, and it just doesn't.
No, it's a totally
It's like,
different
oh, this
medium.
is going on, oh, that's going on, oh, look at all this, look at these nice pictures, you know, this bang bang, you know, boom, kaboom, blam. And it's just like when you try and you put that onto a film, you can you can get an incoherent mess. I mean, look at some of even the old superhero films that were disasters. You know, even back in the 90s, you know, those god awful ones. And you know, it's like, oh, they played it close to the comic, and it's like, yeah, and that's why it turned out the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big problem. I think with certain types of comic books, you can, can translate them onto film. I think if you look at like Grant Morrison or any of those sort of writers, you know, their sort of more graphic novel approach, a much more serious tone
Mm,
to their books can translate. I mean, you know, the Nolan Batman films were pretty much based on the comic books from that kind of era.
mm,
You know, the Watchmen, you know, not the terrible TV show, but the film was very, very close to the books. Although Alan Moore might disagree. But you know, I think it depends on sort of whether or not you're talking about the comic books from the 1960s, 70s, and the 80s, or the sort of, you know, comic books of the late 90s, 2000s, which is quite different. You know, they're quite different beasts because, you know, they, like most things, if you look at television in the 60s and 70s and compare it to what television in the current day, Well, I say the current day, maybe that's not a good a good example, but certainly before 2016,
Yeah.
there was a sort of progression to things which were more mature, more adult, more complex. Certainly with characters with a lot more backstory, emotions, and all sorts of things, and much more cinematic.
Mm.
But I think comic books, I mean, the comic book industry is pretty much dead on its feet at this point, anyway.
Well, I've been lucky enough to go back and find some of the old gems that have, but
Yeah,
even then, I don't know if maybe it's just me. Maybe I just am unique in a sense that I like things to be a bit more grounded instead of just bang bang boom boom. I mean, I will admit I do love a good fight every now and then. Like I love big scale battles, but I don't know that these films just have a way of doing it that just is quite incoherent to me. I don't know if it's just maybe my attention span is just warped, but I just cannot seem to focus a lot of the time, which is why I appreciate the slower, more character-driven pace of the second film. And I
yeah.
do think this film does have that as well. I do
Hmm.
think it does take time, but unfortunately, not enough. And I feel like with its 2.5 hour runtime,
It's too long.
it somehow managed to achieve very little. And
Well, I think the main problem is you have an over reliance on CGI. Everything looks hyper unreal or uncanny valley. Kind of takes you a bit out of it. Even with really good CGI, it can do that, and it's even worse when it's bad CGI because it really takes you out of it. Like the girl in the sort of the walking, like the hamster wheel,
mm,
that was so bad. But I think at a 2.5 hour runtime, you have to ask why they do that, and the reason is because when it translates onto when it transfers onto Disney Plus, uh, that's all about the watch hours. But I mean, at what point do people get sort of bored or their eyes get tired looking at all this hyper saturated CGI for two and a
yeah,
half hours? It kind of it makes you tired.
it
It makes your
does.
eyes tired. It makes you restless because you got all this action going on. Then you got all the slow bits in between. You're like, oh god, get on with it. Um, and that I think puts the creation, the creative side of a film at risk, and people's eyes are going to wander or they're going to switch off. I don't think because it's longer necessarily that people are going to keep watching it because they might just go,
Well,
what
no,
is?
because in my second watch through, it must have gotten to about the 2 hour point, and
Mm.
as much as I hate to say it, I was kind of thinking, can this just be over already?
Yeah, because then you start thinking, especially if you watch it more than once, and the second view, you're like,
You
God,
know
I've
what's
got
coming.
so many minutes left, and oh God, it's still going to take another half hour.
Yep.
Yeah, and you
You should
start
never feel like that with a
wondering.
film.
No, and then you never used to. I mean, you would occasionally, but I mean, when you're invested in a film, you don't start thinking like that. But at 2.5 hours, I think you do really because your
Mm.
mind starts to wander. You start looking at your phone, or you start thinking, oh God, I'm hungry, or want to go to the loo. It becomes a bit of a chore, and that shouldn't be like that. It should be something that takes you on an adventure. You escape the world that you're in, and you get enveloped by all this stuff and the world building and the characters. You get invested in them, and there are moments, obviously, when you are invested, like particularly with Rocket in this, the third
Absolutely.
film. You do get engaged, but those moments can be quite fleeting. And it's again very jarring because you've got a film that's as disjointed as the third film because you've got all these. Someone I watched a review recently, and it was described pretty much how you described it to me, which was there's the Rocket film, and there's this other film built around it, so it's like a film within a film.
Which annoys me because I think James Gunn missed a very big opportunity here for Rocket Raccoon to have his own film, which
Mm.
I think he deserved. I
Yeah, I think
really
there's a
do.
lot of superfluous stuff going. I mean, visually very good. Like as I said, the design language, especially on that very organic kind of
Yeah,
meteorite planet, whatever
but
the organic.
if ever, so just hang on to that. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna,
sure.
because all of that turns out to be a complete big waste of time, which I will
A
get onto.
canard. Yeah.
So about 20 minutes ago, I was just
Right.
going to discuss the plot for the third film. So
Right.
I'll get onto that right now. So the plot essentially is, um, as I say, the Guardians are on nowhere, and you'd have to watch the Christmas special to understand everything. So basically, they've bought that, they're doing it up, they're making it a nice place to live, and it looks like they're just trying to start a life there, really. And the movie probably has one of the best openings. I will agree with this. It does have one of the best openings I've ever seen in a film. The camera is just completely focused on Rocket, and it kind of follows him around, listening to Creep from Radiohead, which is one of my favorite songs. So I'm not biased. But just seeing Quill drunk and just seeing how the characters going about their lives, is a very, very cool way to open the film. And then just before you can, like, okay, so let's get started. Who is this guy? A big gold Captain Marvel looking dude who I'd never ever heard of, so I needed a geek who knew what he was talking about to tell me who this was. And he's called Adam. I can't remember his full name, but he was actually the first character in the whole MCU to use the Infinity Gauntlet. So we're talking about a big character here, someone who's very, very
Adam
powerful. There's
Warlock.
Adam Warlock, that's it. There's a lot of backstory around him, and I think he could potentially play a very big role in Phase 5. I think that's what they're sort of building towards. But I question why he had to be in this film at all, but I'll get onto that a bit later. So he shows up to retrieve Rocket for the High Evolutionary, which we'll get onto just a bit later, and he shoots him and almost fatally wounds. Well, he does. He fatally wounds him, and I can't exactly remember why. I think it was accidental. They try to heal Rocket, but there is something inside him, like a kill switch, that if anyone tries to damage or mess with the technology, it will self destruct to prevent it from going into the wrong hands, which is completely out of nowhere. Like, oh, well, we've known him this whole time and we're only just finding that out now.
A
So
Deus Ex Machina,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, because it
Plot
just
needs to happen.
it feels exactly. It feels like something that's there purely to drive the script forward. So they discover that in order to stop the kill switch from basically self-destructing Rocket, they have to retrieve these special kind of codes in order to stop it. And those codes are at the place that you were describing, that sort of organic archive place. What they
Yeah.
are doing there is frankly beyond me, but that is a place that the High Evolutionary sends all of his data, I guess. And so the Guardians make quick haste over to that place to try and retrieve the codes. And there is basically what can only be described as, oh my god, look how pretty these visuals are. Because
Yeah.
that entire section of the film turns out to be completely pointless as the codes have been moved.
But you've
Just
got
before.
they're hooked up with Gamora again.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
she came back.
yeah.
By the way, yeah, just came back. Like,
From yeah.
and now
What's for?
she's a complete bitch.
Yeah, she's completely awful.
She's actually the worst character in this film. I frankly can't stand her.
She
So
she does she does soften up a little bit at the end, but then she
a
kind of
little bit, but even then,
but
it's
even then
just
it
like
doesn't go anywhere because you
no,
think, well, will they or won't they? And then it's just completely just
no,
done
they don't.
away with altogether.
They don't. Just to ruin it for
Spoilers.
all of you, they don't.
Mm.
So don't even bother getting invested in their relationship because there isn't one. She's just there because there needs to be someone to watch
She
Rocket while the
don't
Guardians
need
do
no
stuff.
man.
And of course she doesn't because it's 2023. So anyway, the code has been taken out. I I'm doing my best to remember. It's all a bit fuzzy, a bit like this film, really. So
Yeah.
then they just say, right, stuff it. We're going to go and confront the High Evolutionary. And then, of course, they're like, but that's a trap. That's what they want you to do. It ain't a trap. If you know it's a trap, it's a confrontation. And okay, dum.
It's a
I
trap.
guess I didn't
Spoiler.
laugh at that joke. I just thought yeah, she's right. It's a trap. It's a trap. So they go to the High Evolutionary on the Counter Earth, which is a planet that he made. So I'm going to get more into the High Evolutionary and Rocket's flashbacks a bit later on. I'm just going to explain the basic plot for now. So they go to the High Evolutionary. It turns out that the codes are in one of his minions' head. He downloaded it into a computer in his head. So they kill him, they get the code, and they rush back to save Rocket. And they only save him just in the nick of time when he's having a near death experience. He comes back, and then the High Evolutionary is trying to escape, but his other minions realize that he is bonkers and a complete whack job because he genocides an entire species that he just created because they turned out to be, surprise, surprise, not perfect, because there's no
Uh-huh.
such thing. A bit of a, and I hate to be sacrilegious, and I don't mean to offend anyone religious in the comments, but the High Evolutionary is very much a metaphor for God and how
Yeah.
God behaves towards human beings. This idea that we are imperfect and disgusting and impure. The High Evolutionary has a very similar kind of thing, where if beings don't meet his standards, he just destroys them and starts all over again.
He's a dick.
Yeah, which the
Basically.
God of the Bible did in the Old Testament with drowning the whole world. So that's a bit of a metaphor right there. But like I say, I'm not being religious. Chris Pratt, please don't beat me up. Sorry. It's like, because I know he's very. I'm just saying, I'm quite surprised Chris Pratt actually liked this film because he can't see the similarities between. Anyway, so yeah, so he's basically. I mean, the High Evolutionary is a piece of work. Let's just
Oh
put it
yeah.
that way.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that there is a very satisfying moment at the end. But I think in order to get to that, we have to talk about Rocket's flashbacks. So whilst Rocket is on the brink of death, on the operating table, we have what is, in my opinion, the best scenes in the entire film. And I think
Gut wrenching.
everyone seems to universally agree on this,
Mm.
is the flashbacks to Rocket's
And
creation.
it was the flashbacks that I heard about that made me not want to see the film.
Yeah.
Yes, they turn out to be the best things about the film, but it was soul destroying because it was very, very dark, very, very sad. And I mean, I would talk about pulling on your heart. I felt utterly manipulated and it was horrible, horrible. But yeah, it was the most rewarding in terms of drama and storytelling, and pathos and you know meaning, things of meaning and value and relationships and hope and the betrayal of hope and dashings of hope. It was a very hopeless kind of situation, and you felt awful
Mm.
watching it. It was, I was gut wrenched. It was just one of the most, anything with animals being hurt, I am not good with generally, even if it's CGI, right? Even in the Thing, right, when the dog becomes like the Thing, even that upset me. I'm a real sucker for animals, and I hate seeing them suffer. And oh, that face! Honestly, look at that face.
I
That
know.
killed me. Oh God, though.
Sweet, innocent little Rocket. And, well, he was an innocent raccoon. He was taken, he was cybernetically augmented and
Another
experimented
raccoon.
on, and he becomes the Rocket Raccoon that we all know and love. But, this guy. So, this does also introduce us to one of the best characters. In fact, I'm just going to say it, and another reviewer said this. This CGI otter, I want to just let that sink in. This CGI otter gave the best performance out of any character since, I can't even think, a long time ago. And it just, the emotion, the innocence, the pureness of this character. The worst thing was is you just knew she was going to die. You just
Yeah.
knew it. They were setting her up for that because here's the most likable
Spoilers.
character you could ever think of. You just knew it was coming.
It was her and the little group that they had, the walrus and the rabbit,
Walrus and the rabbit, yeah.
which are also from the comic book. Even though I think they lasted longer than than in the
Yeah,
film.
I think they did, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was just soul destroying. The whole thing was the way it was done, the way it was, dare I use the word, executed, was 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 so absolutely gut wrenching. But yeah, I agree. I think also, hats off, big mention to, for all the all the criticism and clap back at the CGI from Disney, Marvel. They did
The people who animated this did a great
on the
job.
animals, yeah, did
Yes.
the absolute most amazing job. Fantastic work. Maybe not so much the girl on the gerbil hamster ring
Well,
thing.
like I say, I think they spent all the budget on the animals, quite
Yeah, and
frankly.
it absolutely worked. I mean, when you anthropomorphize animals, you've got that animal chocolate button eye thing going on, right? And then you've got the cutesy fluffy furry thing, and then you're like, oh, and the voices,
Yeah. And the
and yeah,
actress, oh my,
and the
she has
actress.
a lovely voice.
Mm.
Just so there's something so angelic about her. And, she's in many ways, which honestly, I tear up even when I think of this scene. But to just keep you guys updated, so with the flashbacks, you see Rocket very young, experimented on him growing up, and unfortunately, he spends every night in a cage with these other animals. And
And they're
Lila,
separated in different cages, so they can't
well,
even
no, there's two together.
hug each other. Yeah, two together. Yeah, yeah.
And Lila puts her hands through the cage and with a little cloth and wipes the blood off Rocket's head. It's just so, and they become friends, they play, they sort of dance around in there. So you really got that kind of like, even though they're in the darkest situation possible, they still play and they they give each other names. Lila, Teeths, Floor, and Rocket. He gives his name because he sees a rocket flying off into space and he loves the idea of flying, so he calls himself Rocket.
And they've never
Um,
seen the sky before,
no, well,
apart
Rocket
from
did.
Rocket. Yeah,
Rocket did because
and
the hive.
he's
Sorry.
explaining it to them, and they're dreaming and visualizing it, and it's her dream to see the sky, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
that's gut wrenching.
This is the hardest fucking bit.
Mm.
Sorry, swearing, but the high rocket is. This is the great thing, and this is what I think makes the High Evolutionary such a great villain. Disgusting, but great. Is Rocket. The High Evolutionary has a problem. He can't seem to evolve the animals into a domestic species. They keep getting aggressive. And Rocket is able to figure that out when he's just a kid. He is more intelligent than a man god. And that really damages his ego. And he becomes very frustrated that a disgusting, wretched creation, are we starting to see more religious patterns here? Has essentially been, better than him, and he loses it. He goes mad. So all he's really interested, once Rocket helps him create the quote unquote perfect beings, which of course later on they go on to be just as flawed as any other being, he decides, oh well, I don't need you anymore now. So he wants to dispose of Rocket and his friends, but he just wants to keep Rocket's brain, to learn from it. So Rocket decides to break out. He's been stealing little pieces every night and hiding them in the cell so that he can build a little. Feels a bit kind of like, oh, that's convenient, but I suppose it works.
A key.
He's able to unlock the doors and he's able to get Lila out, and they're dancing. They have this lovely moment, and
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm just gonna say, he is such a good actor. He is the performance he gives. Like, yeah, I knew you were gonna try something like this. Is just so like, oh, my fist was clenching.
Hmm.
I remember first watching it, and then he has the gall when Rocket starts screaming. He starts mocking him by going, where? It's like, oh my god.
Like you couldn't get any worse at that point.
You just wish you were in front of him so you could grab a crowbar and just beat him to a pulp. Like, but yeah, don't worry, Rocket takes care of that by doing a bit of a face-off, shall we say, with him.
Later on.
And he gets his other friends killed because the security guards show up and they shoot his other friends.
Yeah.
And Lila gives the most just tear-jerking last words. All she says is, "the sky," and dies. Rocket escapes in a ship, and what I love is as he's flying away, you just see his face change. He starts to frown and starts to look very, like gives birth to the Rocket that we knew in the first film. Very for himself, doesn't care about people, not because he's evil, but because he's built up walls around himself. And I do think that's wonderful how they brought his character full circle.
Yeah.
I just feel, and this is my own personal take, you guys might disagree, it deserved to be more than just the flashbacks that we got. It just felt rushed to me. It all felt like this should have been, instead of a Christmas special, we should have gotten a short film, an hour-long short film, The Origins of Rocket. And that should have led up to Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah, then but then again, I can see that, and I can agree absolutely to a point.
But then again, would Guardians 3 have even been watchable without the Rocket stuff in it?
Precisely, exactly. But then again, they might have been able to focus on a much more concise story. But then
And character
ultimately,
development.
yeah, but ultimately though, they would have still padded it out to 2.5 hours for the streaming service. So
Yeah.
it damned if you do, damned if you don't. But yeah, I think it does kind of take you out of the progressing the story, such as it is, which isn't that complicated a story, but it's very convoluted in the way it's backwards and forwards, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's all over the place. It's over there for a quest there, bounce to nothing.
I don't like that kind of storytelling. Sometimes it works, but you have to do it right. You have to do it really well.
Quests work better in fantasy than they do in science fiction or hero things.
But as I say, this was all taking place while Rocket was on the brink of death, and then we get what is probably the most beautiful scene in the whole of MCU, and one that quite surprised me, especially coming from Disney. We have a very, very spiritual-esque experience with Rocket, I suppose you could say, in purgatory just before he crosses over, and he sees Lila and his friends again, and just her wonderful angelic voice literally just works so perfectly here, because you could say, well, she is Rocket's angel, and she's come to say to him, hey, we never left you. And he says, like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I got you killed. And she's like, no, they have this really lovely moment. And Rocket says, can I come with you, And she's like, not yet. You still have a purpose. And then even going as far as to say, there are the hands that made us and there are the hands that guide the hands. This idea that you're not a mistake, which I just thought was like, oh my
Profound.
God, it was. And it's something I did not expect to see in.
And as someone who's had a near-death experience, that
Listen, everybody,
really resonated with me.
this guy has the real deal here.
Yeah, that, and the weird thing is, I could sense it was coming. The way that now is not your time kind of thing, and it was just wow, because if people have had something like that experience happen to them, they know. And that was very, very. There was some verisimilitude.
And I love it. I did appreciate this, but when she says, "My beloved raccoon," the story's been yours all along. You just didn't know it. And what does he say? I'm not a raccoon, and then straight back in his body. And it's wonderful. But unfortunately, yeah, he gets sidelined for a little bit. I don't know what it is, but the focus was taken off him. And even though he had all this wonderful character development, Quill, Gamora, Nebula, Drax, they're all just running around like a bunch of idiots for the whole film. Rocket felt like he was the only character that actual genuine thought was put into in this film.
Hmm.
And the other ones, their character, like Quill should have been developed. The new
Quill was very
Gamora,
underused, and I mean, he had a
very
great
underused.
moment towards the end, but I just felt because it's such an ensemble cast, you're going to end up in a situation where characters are going to get underused
Yeah,
because there's just too many of them, and that's always
exactly.
going to be a problem. And that's why in a lot of ensemble things you split them up and have their little scenes between them. But yeah, there's a lot of afterthought, I think, in some of this. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know why. If it's the writing of performers couldn't be there for whatever contractual reason, I don't know. Who knows? But that's where it kind of suffers a bit. But I mean, with Star Lord and Gamora, there was kind of they were trying to create, but it felt like kind of a bit artificial that he was trying to uh to get back that relationship with that Gamora, which from Thor: Love and Thunder or whatever he lost,
No, from
which
Infinity War.
Infinity War, sorry, yeah.
She
So
died.
yeah, and that kind of takes it out because I like the Guardians movies more than I like the MCU movies,
Yeah.
and I might have watched Infinity War, I think once. I didn't watch Thor: Love and Thunder. I watched Endgame, but I couldn't get on with that film. I did not like that film.
No.
And it again, so many things going on, too many characters, so many things happening, lots of people dying, lots of things going on, and time travel and all this nonsense. And ultimately, if you want to think about the characters in this film and the other two films, and you've got to try and remember a certain specific scene in another film from a different story which involved all these other characters, which is just too much. It kind of like, why is this happening again? What happened again? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And my memory is really bad, so I mean, God help anyone who's like me who has a terrible memory, or you know has a dyslexic brain, or a deranged brain, or whatever it is, or is ADHD or whatever. Forget it. You're not going to get on with that particularly.
No.
And I find that when you're trying to connect all these different threads, these characters that you knew from the first two films, but something's happened in between, and you can't quite pinpoint why or how or where or what.
Yeah.
And it's just like it becomes a bit frustrating. So
I
rather
always
than
say,
focusing on the character developments, you're focusing on the missing points of that development from the other
I
films.
always say, if you're going to have characters crossover, never impact the characters' individual stories.
Yeah, and the
And
main
that way,
story. Yeah.
you can isolate them. You can say, I wasn't fond of that crossover because I didn't like the other characters. It's okay, because that could just be mentioned in a throwaway line.
Very much. I mean,
But
you could have the Guardians appear in let's say Endgame or whatever, but
of course,
you kind of keep what happens in that in its own thing.
its
Okay,
own
Thanos
thing.
is a
Yeah.
bit of a problem because he's obviously the main villain in that, and Gamora's the daughter, and
Yeah.
so you're going to have a little bit of problems
And
into that,
that's
but you
another
shouldn't
big
impact the main
problem.
story of the Guardians.
And that's
So
another big problem because the Guardians are what really truly kick off that story. And I tell you, they only get like 10 minutes of screen time in the whole. I feel like they should have really been the main characters in Infinity War and Endgame. But
but then
I,
if they did that, then you end up with the same problem with the trilogy here, because then
yeah.
that impacts this story, and it has done already, even though they're only in it for a short time. So if they would have been in that even more, that impact on the third part of the story would have been even more greater.
Oh, and there's another revelation that I totally forgot to mention, which you could forgive yourselves for not knowing this if you haven't seen the Christmas special, but Mantis is Quill's sister.
Yeah, that again, you have to watch all these.
And once again, if you'd come in fresh from Guardians 2, and one of the first things Mantis says is, well, I'm his sister.
Yeah, and
And
it's like,
you'd
what?
be sat there going, "Wait, what? Yeah, what?"
Exactly.
And
And that's
it's
why,
so
and that's why it really, as a separate entity in its own right, as a trilogy of its own set of movies, unlike any other sort of trilogy in cinematic history, you've got all these disparate elements spread out over different TV shows and films that you need to watch in order to understand what's going on in this
yeah,
trilogy. It is such a stupid idea.
yeah,
It's a stupid idea because you've broken the fourth wall in that regard, because you can't have a coherent story without all these plot threads being intertwined with absolutely everything else. It just becomes a knot, this Gordian knot of information, and you can't untangle yourself from that, because you need those others. And it's like, well, I'm not really invested in Thor Love and Thunder. I'm not really invested in Secret Invasion, or all these other, Secret Wars or whatever it is.
mm.
Not Secret Wars, but you know what I mean. It's like I don't want to sit through 3 hours of Endgame before I watch the third part of Guardians, for example.
Because that's
I
what I
don't
had
want
to
that,
do.
or the
That's what
second
I
part.
had to do.
Yeah, and I don't want to have to do that. If I want to watch a Guardians trilogy, I want to watch a Guardians trilogy, not
And
that and
this
about 5 other films and
and
TV
this is
shows.
why I adore the second one. It
Mm,
is purely and 100% focused on the Guardians themselves. Nothing to do with Thanos, nothing to do. I'm sure someone will say, "Oh, actually there was a reference." I don't care. Shut up. It felt contained. It felt like it developed both Quill, Rocket, Gamora. All of the characters felt like they were getting development. We had the new character of Mantis. She was a nice addition. It's one fact, me and you have got to watch Guardians 2, Lee.
mm,
Honestly, because it is just my favorite. I love it. I feel like the characters get the treatment I wanted them to get. And for
mm,
those of you who are wondering, I saw the first one when I was 14, never saw the second one, saw the third one a week and a half ago. So I went back and I watched 1 and 2.
mm,
So, that's why I was hoping that, you know, I wasn't I and you know what? I went into Guardians 2 just not expecting it to be great at all, and it just blew me away. I genuinely, when I'd finished, I sat up and I said, "That was great. I love that." Top 5 MCU films for me. That's gone straight into the top 5. So, I know some of you guys might think I'm weird, but to sort of close this up, um sorry, I've gone a bit disjointed now.
Well, it's a bit like the script for this film. I mean, we've done the flashbacks of Rocket, so the rest is really about wrapping up the film.
Mm,
I mean, the the weird thing to me was when they visited that planet, like that alternative Earth, and it's got all these half animal, half human hybrids, and they're supposed to be perfect, and they're living in this society that's very, very similar to today. Lots of street violence, graffiti, and dirt everywhere, and rubbish everywhere, and you got the pristine kind of you know uh towns with the houses all look the same.
very 60s looking.
Yeah, and and then they get genocided.
Yeah, well,
I,
like I say, that was the sort of thing with that was very Old Testament. It was like, "Oh, they
Mm.
haven't met my standards, so I'm gonna wipe them out." And
It's just the
the
way it
High
happens. You
Evolution.
don't see it. I mean, you see the beginnings of it. Like, I mean, the
Yeah.
planet starts to get, but you don't see the fallout of that. You don't see. I mean, it's almost like, one death is a tragedy, but a million is a statistic. So
Well, that's
it's
the
got
thing,
that feeling
because
about it.
when the Guardians get back on the ship, they're like, "I can't believe he genocide the whole planet." And Quill even says, "We've got bigger things to worry about right now. We've
They
got Rocket."
failed. I mean, this is the thing. They failed to save those people on that planet. For all the flaws, I mean, it was just like anyone else on this planet, but
Pretty much.
billions of lives gone, and there's not really that much thought to it. Okay, they saved a few animals and a few children,
I
hybrid
mean, I
children,
think
whatever.
what they hoped was that would show how evil the High Evolutionary is, but it's like we'd already come to the conclusion that he
He
was
was
an
a shit.
evil, soulless piece of shit. You didn't have We didn't need any more. It's like
Yeah, and then
Christ.
the team gets sort of very kind of artificially separated, don't they? And then
Yeah.
like they try and rescue the Star-Lord, but he's already there,
On the
and
ship, and
yeah,
you're smacking your head against the wall, like, why are you so bloody? And then again, if Drax had just not been such an idiot and stayed where he was told to stay, that situation wouldn't have happened. That's why his character gets on my bloody nerves.
and then you wanted to talk about Star-Lord's helmet, didn't
I
you?
did, but we're just going to get onto that shortly. So
Yeah.
I will say, Chris Pratt, like I say, amazing performance. His reaction to Rocket briefly passing away, the screaming, was probably the most tear-jerking, believable emotion
And
I've
he
ever
didn't give
seen.
up. They didn't give up on him. That
No,
I mean,
I'm
everyone
not
else gave up on him,
letting
but
him go. But here's another problem I have, and once again, here is another problem. Where is Quill and Rocket's relationship?
Mhm.
Point out any scene to me where they genuinely act like best friends. So let's go for the first Guardians, the scene where Rocket is drunk and he was trying to pick a fight, and he's like, Rocket, no one's calling you a monster. Bloody, bloody, blah. Hold out for one more line, you'll be rich. Okay? Guardians 2, if you're trying to get everyone to hate you, you're doing a good job. So I guess they don't like each other very much. Guardians 3, he's my best friend and I'm not letting him go. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but I think you can get that kind of relationship. I mean, you get that kind of relationship where I mean, we do this as well. We take the piss out of each other, and we could argue, but still friends. And I think that you look at people like Laurel and Hardy, for example. They were absolutely constantly at each other's throats and beating the crap out of each other, and mocking each other and poking each other in the eye and stuff like. But they were still inseparable.
Yeah, but I didn't get that feeling from Quill and Rocket. I'd have loved to have seen their characters
Mm,
grow. Even if it was just a moment where, Quill, kind of like in the video game where,
mm,
he says, Lila will always be with you. Something like that. We never got scenes like that. Instead, in the second film, we got a quick flashback of the two of them flying through the sky with their rockets and
mm,
laughing together. Just something like maybe a montage as he was dying of everything him and Quill did together.
yeah,
You could have had clips from the first and second film and things we never seen, like maybe them two drinking at a bar together, play fighting with guns, silly things like that.
yeah,
Just something to show that relationship. It just felt empty. It felt forced. It was just like, it's nice, don't get me wrong, but I didn't feel there was enough to justify Quill's reaction the way he did, because he was screaming like he just lost his own child.
yeah,
There wasn't enough to justify it.
yeah.
And would he have gotten that emotional if it was Drax? I don't think so. So what is the connection between him and Rocket? We haven't really seen it. And it's like there is a hinted romance, well, not romance necessarily, but strong friendship between him and Nebula, but
Mm,
once again, it all takes place off screen. He fixes Nebula's eye. That's why she doesn't have as much mechanics in her eye. He fixes her arm. That's why her arm looks different. It's all off screen.
Do
So
you think? Do you
people.
think? Do you think? I keep saying Star Lord because like it sticks to my brain more
Sorry,
than Quill.
I just keep
But
thinking of Peter Quill.
do you see him and Nebula getting it together instead, or
No,
because
no.
it almost felt like that's what they were trying to do by like, okay, Gamora's not. She's like, oh, he's a nice guy, really, but I'm just gonna fuck off now. Excuse my French. But then you still got Nebula, and there's kind of a bit of a flirt going on there. I felt. I don't know.
Maybe,
I don't know.
maybe. But
But
yes,
yeah, we can get on to like where we think it's going to go next.
as I say, that's going to be the last part. It's just where can we go from here? But just wrapping up the story now. So, like I say, Rocket comes back and they all head to the High Evolutionaries spaceship cube to rescue all of the children, which were going to be the High Evolutionaries' next species that he was going to start.
It's a
And you
pyramid,
know,
really, wasn't it? Or
it was a pyramid. Well, it was actually a giant cube. It was just the way it was buried in the ground.
all right, right.
It was just the corner sticking out, so it
Oh
looked like
yeah,
a
yeah,
pyramid.
yeah.
It was quite clever, actually.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, while they're there, they're escorting all the kids off, and Rocket spots the animals. And what does he find? Raccoons.
Mm.
And he finally realizes it's like, congratulations, worked
You're a
so hard,
rookie.
forgot how to vacation. Like, well done. It's only taken you 3 films to realize you're a raccoon. Like, I take it the internet doesn't exist in the future. But it's great. It's such a nice moment. And then he confronts the High Evolutionary, and I do love that all the Guardians were there to kick the shit out of him.
Mm.
And they gave the gun to Rocket and they said, kill him. And Rocket doesn't. And he's like, why? Because I'm a guardian of the freaking galaxy. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And they tear his face mask off, and you could, oh, that was grim. Very, very good CGI.
And of
You
course,
know,
he announces that he is Rocket Raccoon in the end.
yeah, he's Rocket Raccoon. Love it. Felt so earned. That was brilliant. And yeah, that obviously they just leave him there to die on the ship. It's a bit like that Batman scene. I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. You know, it's a bit like that. So they take all the animals, and I was just there pissing myself laughing as that woman was just like, oh, for sake, animals too? You know, it's just like, we're never going to fit all this on the ship. So it kind of became like a Noah's Ark moment. There's like, get everything on everything, even those bloody big monsters, which, by the way, Mantis has a telekinetic. She's basically the animal power. She's like Snow White. It's really weird.
Dr. Doolittle.
Basically, yeah. And she gets those big creatures on the ship as well, which is quite funny. But there you go. And yes, Cube blows up, and that's pretty much it, isn't it? Because they're in nowhere, because nowhere is a big floating head. So now they're all there. And
Yeah,
Drax,
Quill has to leap across, but the helmet.
oh yeah,
There you go.
so Quill drops his tape recorder for his songs, and of course he can't leave that because it's very important to him, and he has to try and float across from one side of space, from one ship to another in space. He gets stopped by a piece of rubble and he starts freezing and swelling, except there's just one problem. Star-Lord has a space mask and rocket boots, and we've seen him fly in space numerous times before with no bother. Now people say, oh well, he left it on his desk. Well, the thing is, would you think that if you were going on, a space mission, you would bring your space gear when you have it? I mean, it's
He
just
had to leave it behind somewhere for plot to happen, I guess, or
a
for
plot to
scene
happen.
to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. You know that very iconic mask that's so cool and so badass. Yeah, you don't get to see it for the entire film.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't it one of those things that sort of goes like the whole Marvel thing, which just goes jump, 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 jump. So it's hardly any extra weight, really, is it?
Yeah, oh, I hate that. I always hated the nanotech Iron Man
Yeah, I
suit.
know.
One of the coolest
Oh,
things about Iron Man was how the suit transformed
mm,
as he walked. No orgon, it's just, I hate it.
I know.
But, at least it had been
Such a
there from
cop
the very
out.
beginning.
They only do that now because oh, now you can see the actor's face, which is
But
usually badly superimposed.
another thing I have to talk about, I hate the uniforms. They're bland, they're boring, and they all look the same. Do you remember their amazing individual costumes that they had,
Yeah.
which made them stand out?
Yeah, as individuals, now they look like,
Now they're just
they
this.
look more like the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I hate it. I cannot stand it. I
Mm.
loved Star-Lord has probably one of my favorite costumes in the
I
whole
love that
MCU.
jacket. Yeah, he
Yep,
had
I
a
love
cool
it.
jacket. That
And
deep
like I
red jacket.
say, I massively prefer Rocket's design from the second film because of his costume.
Mm.
Which I'll see if, because I know I've got a picture. There we are. So massively, massively prefer that design. So just a little thing I'm getting off there. So finally, we're going to wrap up with the end. So they're all back in nowhere. Everything's done. And just when they get everything back together, they're now going to separate. the band's breaking up. And even Rocket sat there like, seriously? So that's it? It's over? So Quill wants to go home to spend time with his grandfather because he wants to go find himself. Mantis wants to go find herself. Nebula and Drax want to stay and go find themselves.
Gamora sods off with
Gamora sods off to go be a bitch.
Sylvester Stallone.
With Sylvester Stallone and just go and be an evil person by pillaging and thieving like they used to. So that's nice. That's a good end. Not.
Good character.
And yeah, Rocket is the new captain, which was a nice moment. I did love that. That was a nice moment. And yeah, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm getting really knackered now, if it sounds like it, because...
But then you also have that scene where Star-Lord's with his grandfather and like they're having breakfast, and like the grandfather's just reading a newspaper. Yeah, the post-credit scene. It looks like that's not gone very well, because he's just like, okay, he was very excited that his grandson had turned up after all these years, and then it was just like as if he hadn't really been away, and it was just kind of very mundane. And
so there's definitely going to be a Star-Lord will return. But like I say, so the film ends with a great big dance with all of the characters, which, you know, the song is a bit cringeworthy, typical Disney pop, but it did feel kind of nice in many ways, especially
I got Return of the Jedi vibes.
Oh yeah. Well, that's kind of what it was in many ways, because Rocket's weight had been lifted. Yeah, all the burden that he was carrying around.
And you've got to mention as well, Adam Warlock saved.
Oh yes, sorry, I forgot he was even in the film, because
yeah,
he
exactly.
has no business being.
And then I remember, like before we started the stream, I was like, "What happened to his mum?" I can't, because I was so
she got blown up.
Yeah, and I totally forgot that, because there's all these things going off. It's like, what happened to her?
Yeah, she just got blown up.
She got blown up. But then he sort of had his redemption, didn't he, and saved Star-Lord.
Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention. Yeah, of course. Adam saves Star-Lord when he's floating out in space. He just goes and grabs him. In more religious symbolism, which was really weird, his kind of finger going to touch him, you know, like in the painting, like Adam is God or something. But yeah, he grabs him and flies back to the ship and tries to get in on the group hug, like, yay, I'm a part of the team now.
Yeah, he looked like, like trying to group hug, because he obviously had never had that kind of, because he was always treated like a piece of shit, really.
Yeah,
like
I have to say, I like the actor who plays Adam Warlock, but I don't. If from what I've seen, and this is just from what I've seen, this is why a lot of comic book fans are annoyed. He's meant to be one of the most powerful, most badass characters in the universe, so of course he's been emasculated. He's silly. He's very boyish, and with that silly animal as well. I don't like how it's making me feel.
I'll tell you what he reminds me of. He reminds me of Mordred from Excalibur, you know, with the gold armor on, like the son of Morgana and Arthur. This gold, and he kills Arthur, and Arthur kills him. Yeah.
So like I say, they have a big dance.
And Groot, we've got Groot. Groot had his
of course.
He had his head detached or something. He grew little legs.
I know, and then he started growing his kind of root. It was kind of cool, actually, how his insides were growing, kind of like a nervous system. You know, and then he just grew more and more. Yeah, Groot is back to almost being his full adult self in this film. I
miss Baby Groot.
I miss Baby Groot too.
Especially in the opening of the second film. I thought that was just one of the best openings of
in the whole of film.
Love it.
Honestly, I thought that was genius. Another reason why Guardians 2 is the best. But if I could not be interrupted while because I will lose. I will literally lose where I am.
Go for it.
Shit.
Oh, no.
God damn it. Okay, so the ending of the film, so they're all having a nice big dance-off with Groot and everyone, and as I say, it feels like Rocket's finally let go of his burdens. It's lovely. Nice way. Oh, and we do get... who does Michael Rooker play again? What's his name?
Oh.
Blue guy. You all know who I'm talking about in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
See, look, this is how drained we are after an
I
hour
know,
and
it's
25
been
minutes.
a long time.
He gets a nice little cameo. Oh, and I've never even mentioned James Gunn's brother, the guy who can barely get the arrow to go, and the dog.
I know, Space Doggy. Oh,
I am not bad dog. You don't call
yeah,
me bad
that
dog.
was so good.
Did you take it back? I have never been called a bad dog before. I did love that. I can't remember his name, the fella who's got the arrow now, but it's wonderful that you had that scene with him, like, use your heart, boy. I did like that.
Kraglin.
Yeah, that's it. I think his character's underrated. I loved his badass moment where he finally masters the arrow.
Yeah, I
With
think he's one of those characters that we were talking about earlier that was, kind of
underused.
underused, really.
Yeah, because they kind of just said,
But
"Yeah,
he did have a badass
stay
moment.
and watch Nowhere. We'll be back soon," and all that. He's like, "Sure." That's him out for the film,
Yeah.
pretty much. Which is another thing.
But he
I
did have
just
a badass moment.
he
I
did.
mean, which harked back to the start of the film when he failed to take
Yeah,
out Warlock, and then at the end, he had his big moment.
I love
with
that scene when he just bounces off and he goes, "Who threw this?" And he's
Yeah.
just hiding there, like, baby. I did love that. So
Yeah.
some of the humor is good.
Yeah,
Yeah, there were some laugh out loud moments.
especially with Kraglin and the space dog, which I
Yeah,
can't remember the name.
I think it's Nebula. I think it's
No,
Nebula.
Nebula's Nebula.
No, not Nebula. What is it? What is that word for for a galaxy? Oh my god.
Well, that's a nebula.
Yeah, I know that's
Cosmo. Cosmo.
Cosmo. That's it. Yeah. Oh god. So anyway, there's them, and you all have your nice happy dappy Disney princess pop kind of ending, but it feels earned. And then you get a nice scene afterwards where Rocket has kind of formed a new group of Guardians. So, like you say, you have your fella with the arrow, you have the dog, you have
Warlock.
Warlock, yeah, which is okay. So now the most powerful, now that Thanos is dead, he is the most powerful being in the universe. So talk about an overpowered team. And you've got a girl who I have no idea who she is. But there were weird theories that she could be connected to Venom. Okay, that was something I saw. I don't know how true that is. But yeah, so Rocket gets a nice little scene shooting other animals that are cybernetically enhanced.
Yeah.
Which is a bit strange, especially when you consider the very anti-animal cruelty film. I guess it's only be nice to animals if they're cute,
I guess.
but if they're ugly and dangerous, yeah, just blast the shit out of them.
Bit of a mixed message.
Yeah, but you get him flying towards the screen, and that's really nice. And like I say, you get to see Quill go with his granddad, like you say. So that's definitely going to lead on to a Star-Lord film. So now, finally, getting to the finishing up part of the video. So overall, how would you rate Guardians 3? Give it a final rating.
It's really tough because, like I said, it is two different films, isn't it? You got the film with the Guardians, you got the film with the Rocket. I'll give it a 7. I think.
You think?
Yeah, it's really tough.
I think you might need to watch it again because, like you say, you've seen it once. I watched it twice in quite a close span. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to be honest. I'm gonna have to give it a 6, which I did. It's a shame because
Yeah, I was thinking 6.5, and then I thought I'd be generous, give it a 7 because
it leaves
the
always
rocket things, the rocket scenes. I mean, there are some really great scenes in there.
there are. Well, I'm not going to deny that.
I mean, it's fun in places. I mean, even though that kind of quest to that organic planet where the data was kept was silly as hell, and kind of a bit outside of the scope of the Guardians. Like I think I talked to you about that after we watched it, that it felt like that belonged from a science fiction film that was not in the Marvel or superhero kind of universe. It's more of a science fiction-y concept, which I think would have worked as a separate thing.
Well, this is it now, aren't they? They're kind of blending superheroes with science fiction when
Mm,
really I don't think they work. I think
that's it.
a perfect example is the Tobey Maguire trilogy. You know, yes, there was sciencey stuff like Doctor Octopus. You know, he was augmented, a Goblin, and and even Sandman. Like he
And
was
it's like
created.
mixing magic in with Doctor Strange into the superhero thing as well,
Well,
and
yeah,
that adds. I mean, when you got science fiction, you got magic, you got fantasy, you've got all these things in the superhero. I know those are there in the comic books, but when you introduce it to the MCU, it becomes such a quagmire of too many different disparate things,
mm,
and it becomes a bit of a mess, a confused mess. I think it's better if you keep these things in a more separate I don't know what you want to call it,
well,
a
genre,
separate thing, genre.
genre.
Yeah, because I mean, even though you might get crossovers in the comics, but generally they stood on their own as their own thing
Well, as I
for the
say,
most part.
listen, I hadn't seen the first Guardians in years. I was
Mm,
looking for something to watch, and I'd heard people say that this film wasn't half bad, and it
mm,
was centered around Rocket Raccoon. Now, you know I love anthropomorphic animals.
yeah,
So I thought I'm going to give this a go, and I must have liked it because look, I've done artwork,
that's
so
great.
I only ever do this. This isn't finished, by the way, guys, but I only ever do this when a character connects with me, when I truly connect with a character.
Mm.
Other examples are Chicken Hair. Might not have been the best film, but absolutely love the character. Seriously, go watch that, guys. Great films on Netflix.
And Guardians of the no, the was it the
Oh, Legend of the Guardians, the
Legend
Albert
of the
Garble.
Guardians?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fantastic film. Zack Snyder is honestly one of his most underrated. Go watch that, guys. The animation is incredible, but I really did connect with Rocket and Lila and Star-Lord as well. I just wish that Star-Lord had had more time, and I wish his time with Rocket had more his relationship had had more time to grow. And despite the film being 2.5 hours, it still felt like there was just not enough in there. And that often means that you were focusing on the wrong things.
Mm.
'Cause I think 2.5 hours is plenty of time to get a lot
Hmm.
of character development done, but once again, that like we say, that whole segment, yes, the visuals were impressive, but it was a waste of time, and you kind of have
Yeah,
to
time
wonder
that could have been spent on
character development.
character development, less time on the jokes and the awkward silences
Yes.
and the awkward, see cutaway scenes, and
Yeah,
I mean, you could put those in as
and,
a DVD extra or extended scenes or whatever. But ultimately, for a more concise story, the most important thing within that story is the characters.
so, like I
Are the
say,
characters?
lost my train of thought again now.
Yay! It's late.
Yeah, oh, so you can have more time to talk, I get it. You host the next stream then. No, so, like I say, I think we'll definitely have to go and, I wanna cover the second film in entirety because I
Mm,
just honestly love it that much, but overall, I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 10. There is definitely some good stuff in there,
mm.
and to be honest, it's the best Marvel film this year, and
By
for
miles.
ever since No Way Home, I would say,
Mm.
which
Which is a
For
Sony
for a
film,
film
really.
exactly, for a film that's only a 6 out of 10 is not really very good, is it?
No, that's a damning of really the output of Marvel, Disney, Marvel, whatever you want to
So
call
when people say, "Oh, this is the best MCU film," it's like, they're technically not wrong, but
it. Mhm.
is it the best MCU film ever? No.
No, could have done
No.
better.
And I think when these people calm down and they go watch it a couple more times after the hype has died down, they might start to see the problems.
Mm,
'Cause, sometimes we all get excited about things, and then later on we go back and watch it like, "Oh, yeah, I'm starting to see what people mean now," and that's okay. But, I think and this is just a theory, this is something that another YouTuber kinda showed. Now, I'm not trying to attack James Gunn as a writer or as a person or anything like that, I wouldn't be able to create a blockbuster film in my current condition, so I'm I'm not gonna say I know what I'm talking about and I'm a professional writer, that's not what I'm saying at all, but I think the reason why the second one may have been so much better than this one is because I noticed there was more than one person writing it.
Mm.
And this is a film where it, for the first time in the whole Guardians trilogy, James Gunn has been left completely on his own. So this is very much he was given full creative control, and a lot of people have been saying maybe too much,
Mm.
and to the point where it feels quite self-indulgent and a little bit, I can see where they're coming from. And as I say, I also think there were other aspects like having to carry on the end game and have to shovel the universe stuff in there might have damaged and even thrown off his original script idea, so I'm not going to blame him for that. And like you've been saying, having to carry all this additional weight of the characters and what's happened in between it just ruins the flow of the story.
Mm.
But I'd say that is definitely a playing factor into it. So for me, it's going to be a 6 out of 10. Not awful by any means, but not exactly the film that I feel this trilogy deserved to go out on. And please, don't anyone dare compare this to Spider-Man 3, because that film is great. And I'll kick the crap out of anyone who disagrees. So,
Okay, fair enough.
to close off the stream and this video, where can we go from here? Is there anywhere we can go? We already know there's going to be a Star-Lord, maybe a film or even a cameo, because it said Star-Lord has returned. It didn't mention any of the other characters, and we know that the actor who played Rocket, his name escapes me right now, which I'm really annoyed because I was researching him just earlier, has said that he will not play the character unless James Gunn is involved, which
Well,
is a
that's that
shame
then.
because, yeah. And we all know that James has gone to work for DC. So, yeah. And it's a shame because I honestly think the actor who's played Rocket will never be topped. I think he made the character his own. I think his voice is wonderful. I think his personality is wonderful. I don't think he'll ever be topped. I could be proven wrong, but I personally would love to get a Rocket film, an individual film. Now, we know that his origin's been told. Now, I have had a little bit of an idea for a film, but I'm not going to share it in case it actually does turn out to be popular. I don't want anyone stealing it. But yeah, unfortunately, it just looks like this is very much the end, except for Star-Lord. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that. Like, where did you think they could take this any further, if they could, or should they?
It's a difficult one. I mean, it leaves it open to obviously more, but it seemed very confused because it was like Star-Lord will return, and then it ends really with like Rocket leading the new Guardians. So I don't know, will Star-Lord return in the new Guardians film, or will it be Star-Lord on his own? Will he turn up and rejoin the Guardians with Rocket? Who's going to lead it? I mean, James Gunn is obviously now with DC, so it's obviously going to have to be someone else who's going to be running, the Guardians franchise moving forward.
Yeah.
I imagine they will make more because they've been arguably the more successful of the Marvel DC Marvel universe films. So I think it's going to be tough to follow that because it's James Gunn's got a very unique way of making films. You can tell it's a James Gunn film. You can tell it's
Mm,
got the James Gunn humor and the look about it. So
yeah.
it'll be very different moving forwards. That's going to be interesting. I guess Rocket Raccoon's voice will be a different actor then, unless money talks. So I mean, thankfully it's a voice actor. I mean, you can get someone to emulate that.
Yeah.
Whether they'll be as good, that's
It's
another
Bradley
question.
Cooper. That's who it is.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper, that's right. So I don't know. I would like to see a Rocket movie. I
I
mean,
would
for
love
me,
Rocket and Star-Lord, just them two. I would love to see that relationship on screen, not off screen, not implied, not go buy a couple of comics so you can read that, so you can, not like they do lazy writing. Just I want to see it on screen.
Hmm.
And if you're going to bring Star Lord back, I would love to see him come in with Adam Warlock and the new Guardians. I think that would be nice. And James Gunn, like I say, I mean no disrespect. I just personally, if Guardians 3 was you let off the leash, with no other writers to maybe rein you in or help you out, I just think your style is very visually stunning, character work and emotion, really good, a lot of lovely scenes in there, but I just think it's a little bit incoherent.
Mm.
Okay, maybe that wasn't your fault. Maybe you had studio interference, pressures from executives. We don't know. I'm in no way slagging you off. I don't want you to think I'm slagging you off, but maybe if someone else did take over this franchise and take it somewhere new, that might be better.
It might be. I think how I imagine it would be called the New Guardians of the
The new
Galaxy,
Guardians,
or
yeah.
just the New Guardians. I mean, I guess it would really depend on who they can get back to reprise the roles.
Well, I think Chris Pratt would definitely come back for Star-Lord because I think he
Yeah,
loved that
I
character.
think this will probably be on the back burner for a while until
Yeah,
Marvel, Disney sort themselves out, I should
I hope
imagine.
so.
Yeah, I think it needs to rest because it's been quite a long run over quite a long period of years. Because obviously this film was set back a number of years as well, wasn't it? Because of
Yep.
the COOF restrictions. But I think at 2 hours and a half more plus whatever per film, it's been quite grilling, and I think this is an example of diminishing returns as well, because I think the first film definitely was a success. The second one was lesser success, and the third one even lesser success. So they're losing audience.
Yeah.
So they need to maybe leave it on the back burner for a bit, let it refresh. Hopefully, if Disney or whatever pulls their finger out and sorts themselves out, or Marvel gets sold off to someone who knows what they're doing, hint hint,
Mhm.
then maybe that would be a better situation to then relaunch Marvel again down the line with a refreshed, brand new Guardians. That would be great.
Mhm.
Um, but it really does hook on who takes it over, and if they're gonna mess with it too much or change it altogether, or if they're gonna keep it in the same vein, or it really depends on the style, the actors they bring in, the length of the film, if it's starting from scratch or if it's going to be rebooted in any way, or
Yeah.
I mean, there's any number of things that they could do with it. I just think that they need to kind of let it rest for a bit before they bring it back, or maybe bring in a Rocket Raccoon TV series or something, or
Oh
an
my god.
animated stuff
And
or
like I
whatever.
say, I've already told you my idea. You
Mm.
know, I told you my idea for Rocket. I don't know if I want to share it. Do I want to share it on video? Because then I just look. There have been stories, right? People have come up with things, and then Disney's gone, "Ooh,"
Yeah,
I just
keep it stum,
keep it to
keep it
myself.
stum.
Then I'll take it to them personally. But I do think that a great title sequence for a film would be Rocket Raccoon, because he knows he's a raccoon now. So it's like
Hmm.
you'd have the word rocket, just flashed on the screen, and then slowly underneath it would just be like raccoon.
Yeah,
Like Rocket Raccoon. That'd be like a good film, and Star Lord could be in that because it says he's returning, but it didn't necessarily say for his own film. He could just be cameoing in
that's it.
something.
Well, it could be Rocket Raccoon as Star Lord,
Oh, Rocket and
Just
Star-Lord, yeah. And please, no cringe-worthy fan fiction they're making out now, because the things I have seen.
oh no, don't.
Oh my god, why is it whenever there's an animal character on screen, you weirdos have to come out and just
A lot of dog botherers out there. What can I
ah,
say?
honestly. So yeah, I
Or
think we've
raccoon
talked
botherers.
about everything we need to talk about, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, it's been very
So
interesting. I
if
like
if
talking
you
about.
guys haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I'd say go watch it. I'd say, it's definitely worth a chance, and who knows, you may even love it. Not gonna say it's particularly awful, just not gonna say it's particularly amazing either, but like I say, just keep in mind, guys, this is all our personal opinion, and
There's
yeah.
enough in it to keep you invested in it and entertained. There are going to be moments when you're going to be like, "Oh God, this is heart wrenching." So be prepared for that. Like, it is a bit of
Oh, yeah.
emotional roller coaster from sort of laughing to serious, but there's also going to be periods of time where you're just going, what the hell's going on? Like, that's just inevitable with a Marvel movie these days, especially
Pretty
when it's
much.
2.5 hours long. You
Oh,
are going to phase in and out a little bit. So, have a nice cup of coffee or whatever with you watching it, or a line of something. I don't not saying that. But just something to kind of, you have to really sit down and want to watch this. That's what I'm saying, because it's not one of those films you can casually just switch on and go, right.
yeah.
You kind of need to go, right, and I want to watch this.
I don't think I'll be watching this again for a while, but Guardians 2, that's different. That's very different. Like I say, love that one. But yeah, so I just want to reiterate, guys, and with James Gunn as well, we criticize this stuff because we love them. People say like, "Oh, well, if you love it so much, why are you hating on it?" It's like we're not hating on it. We are
I,
just
I I don't understand that basic bitch argument. It's so stupid. Of
yeah.
course, if you're invested in something, you have certain expectations, or no one's going to have their expectations met. But you're going to criticize things because you love the characters, and you think they can be served better in some ways. Everyone, this is the whole thing about fandoms. Fandoms always disagree on things, and they always have ideas, and they often think their ideas are better, and sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But to say that because you criticize something you hate, that's so reductive and redundant, because why would you waste your energy on criticizing something if you didn't care about it? Obviously you're doing it because you care, not because you hate it.
Mm.
That's the most
If you
absolutely
hate, if you hated
insipid thing.
something, I don't think you'd bother criticizing it.
No,
You
you
just
would.
say that's rubbish and move on.
And move on. Yeah, I mean, a lot of YouTubers do rubbish things and make good bank doing it, but ultimately, they're fans of these franchises in the first place, so they have the most to lose,
Mm,
really, because if it's something underperforming or underdeveloped, or just being allowed to be sort of used as a vehicle for whatever nonsense, um it's a betrayal of the characters, or betrayal of the story, or betrayal of the franchise, and a betrayal of the fans,
yeah,
because the fans know what something is. They understand something absolutely fundamentally,
yeah,
and then when it's underserved, those fans are going to get upset because they know when they're being cheated out of something. We're not stupid.
mm,
And we want to give money. We want to give you our eyes and our brains and our love and our positive tweets, and we want to be on board. We want to love these things. We want to give you our money. But if you're not going to give us something that is what we want, be prepared that we're going to walk away at some point. So, I mean, in this case, it under-delivered, but it wasn't detrimental entirely to the characters, or the elements within it, because there were things in there that did deliver, and
yeah,
that has to be acknowledged. And we do, and it didn't destroy the franchise. 3 films is, a trilogy is a lot, especially when it's 2.5 hours long each. That's a lot of content that has to do a job to keep you engaged and to keep you invested in those characters. And it did that. It did
yeah,
that. It didn't do it brilliantly, didn't do it as well as the first 2 films, but it had those moments in there, which in some cases, some elements of those films, of this film in particular, some scenes in this film were as good, if not better, than some of the scenes in the first 2 films.
yeah. Ultimately, it just left me with a feeling of I love these characters so much. I just wish it was done better.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean I hate the film, but unfortunately, every time I watch it, there will always be that sense of disappointment. But can it be fixed? Maybe. It all depends on what comes next, if there's anything next.
that's it.
But as of now, I'll say thank you to James Gunn for this trilogy. Thank you to all the people who worked really hard, and thank you for all the amazing actors who did such a wonderful job. As I say, we've laid out our criticisms, what we think of the MCU, and why this type of everything bundled into one box storytelling does need to stop. As we just think the Guardian story would have served better as its own entity. But like I say, some of you guys might disagree. Be sure to let it know down in the comments. And I think we lost Lee. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just rolling.
Oh, no problem. So, as I say, let us know down in the comments below what you think. You know, what do you think of Guardians 3? Some people say it's the best one in the trilogy. Some people are probably going to criticize me for saying the second one's the best in the trilogy, but that's just how I feel. And, you know, I don't really see to each his own, you know, with this trilogy. I think it's great for what it is. So, as I say, I think we're going to wrap up now.
Yep, look, we're all different. We all have our likes and loathings, and we can never agree on everything. But what a boring and depressing world it would be if everyone just agreed on everything. And I think people on Twitter who kind of want to box you in and force you to agree with them on 99.999% of everything that they say. I mean, that's just received wisdom. It's not independent thought. And I think, certain films will push certain buttons in certain people and get the desired result, or the opposite.
One fella in the comments, when I criticised the new sonic screwdriver design, he commented in and said, "Oh my gosh, will you stop being so miserable? It's great. And stop being like the Star Wars fandom."
Yeah,
And
well, that's the thing. They criticize you for not liking something, but it's them who have the emotional response. And it's them who can't stand that anyone thinks differently to them. It's them who are the miserable shits who want to control other people and tell you what to do, or the little authoritarian tin pot dictators who go around saying, you can't not possibly like the things that I like, because I like is better than everything you don't like. And it's just so absolutely redundant and reductive, and ultimately it's toxic positivity.
yeah,
They can complain about toxic fans and toxic behavior, but really when you're kind of forcing that your worldview is so constantly positive all the time and everyone else is
and
depressing,
do you know
and
what the worst
you're
thing is about it?
projecting a lot.
Do you know what the worst thing is about it? Some people might have gone in wanting to love this film because everyone else says they love
Yeah.
it, and they didn't like it. Guys, if you are that person, if you are feeling like, I feel like I'm wrong because I dislike this film, no, you're not. And you're not alone. This film does have a lot of problems, and I can tell you now, there are quite a few people out there with a voice who are making that known. It is not the perfect Marvel film that it's being made out to be. So don't let these people bully you into thinking that you have to have a positive opinion about something or a negative opinion about something. Always go by what you think. I gave this film a chance. I didn't just listen to the people on what YouTube said, because some made it out to be the worst thing ever. I watched it for myself. There were parts I liked, there were parts I didn't, and I can appreciate it. So always go by your own opinion, guys. That's very important. So I think we're going to wrap up now, Lee.
Yep.
It's been
Well said.
great doing this. We're definitely going to be doing a series like this for multiple other films. And if you guys would like me to do like a separate individual stream on Guardians of the Galaxy 2, probably won't be as long, but yeah, I'll definitely do that for you. And the first one, but I know I'm going to get so much hate for my opinion on the first one. It's just how I am. Like I say, to each his own. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. This is something new for my channel. I want to branch out and cover many franchises, Alien, Predator, all good things like that. And of course, maybe some Marvel and DC. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks ever so much for coming on, Lee. It's been great to have you as always.
Thank you for having me.
Very passionate, gives the speeches. I know some of you might not always understand everything he says, but trust me, it comes from the heart. Especially the very I don't know, passionate words that you use. You have a way of talking that really gets the point across. That's why I love having you on.
Oh, thank you. Even if it's
Uh,
bollocks.
no, it's not. Right, so thanks very much for watching, guys. Stay safe and happy wherever you all are, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.